The tales of heroes are full of intense struggle. Demonic powers, attempting to destroy a kingdom or more, are confronted and defeated by a single stalwart soul, armed with little more than a sword and their courage. It's a dramatic scene that captures the imagination of many, but in reality, it's a bit unrealistic. Sure, we love those epic moments as a great force is defeated by a simple, courageous hero, but a moment's reflection, and we realize that we could never show the same unflinching zeal as those great warriors. We're too scared, too weak, too frustrated with our own struggles, that displaying even an ounce of courage seems far beyond us. But that is where we often miss the point. For in truth, the bravest souls are those who feel that crippling fear, and yet are willing to try nonetheless. And while we may not have the fate of the world in our hands, the trials we do face, despite their simplicity, are oftentimes greater than any calamity, because they are ours. Life has a way of providing just the right set of challenges that try us to our very center. While they may not seem grand in the larger scale of things, those personal fears and foes give us trials that are just as daunting, and the courage displayed in response just as powerful. The darkness in the world has a way of sucking our very life from us, pulling us into a world of despair, depression, and fear. But in those moments, in those months, or even years, the courage that we show will grant us the light and life we need to push onward, sailing through those troubled waters and making our way to the sun, rising just beyond the horizon. Ever since the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis began the aptly named console wars, there has always been a healthy debate over which gaming system was the best. While the consoles have grown, evolved, and sometimes been replaced altogether, the debate over which system is the most efficient, the most powerful, and the most fun rages on, renewed with every new generation. But while the home consoles have always enjoyed a massive amount of competition and attention, from the early 1990s to the late 2010s, the handheld market lay almost solely in the hands of Nintendo. While Sega and Sony both had their own handheld systems with impressive sets of technology, Nintendo always seemed to have the right balance of science and fun to dominate the market, creating amazing games and innovative playstyles. In the early 2000s, Nintendo's dual-screen contribution to handheld gaming came to the world as the Nintendo DS. Several months before the DS was released, Nintendo began development for the Zelda game that would be brought to the system, a game with a playstyle similar to Four Swords Adventures. The intention for a Four Swords-style game carried on for several months, until outside forces began to intervene. As we mentioned before, Nintendo had originally planned for the sequel to Wind Waker to be produced for the GameCube. The lackluster reception of Wind Waker pushed developers to make their main console title A Return to Hyrule. But the executives did not want Tetra and her crew to simply sail into the sunset and take their cel-shaded design with them. Convinced that the Wind Waker design still had a place in the Zelda series, the proposed sequel moved to the DS, supplanting Four Swords and bringing us Phantom Hourglass. The game doesn't take very long to remind us exactly where we are and what we're doing, as Nico has designed a little presentation to explain what had happened in the game before. The details aren't exactly right, though to tell the whole story in 6 slides would be a challenge that Nico does a decent enough job with. It doesn't seem to impress Link, however, as he has once again fallen asleep, requiring Tetra to come and bring him to. it seems their search for a new Hyrule has yet to reach its conclusion. Their hunt for land has taken a detour, as rumors of a ghost ship haunting the waters near their location has reached their ears. Sure enough, the ship makes an appearance, and Tetra, unafraid of the dangers that may lie in wait, springs into action. Moments later, a cry from their captain is heard, and the ghost ship begins to move away. Link leaps for the vessel, struggles to hang on, but falls into the water and into darkness. The next thing you hear is a sound that I'm sure put fear into many a seasoned player. Sure enough, you awaken to a fluttering fairy above you. But although the voice is an instant callback to Navi, this fairy is almost nothing like her. While Tattle is an irritated tsundere, and Navi is, well, a blank slate, Seela is easily the most cheerful companion that we have ever had. Happy, gutsy, and determined to be of help. She also seems to have lost her memories, washed up on the shore of this island just as Link was. But despite having a condition that would terrify anyone, Seela has not let it get her down, and is more than eager to help Link on his quest to rescue Tetra. Unlike most companions, Seela is a constant presence, not just in the narrative, but also on screen. With the bottom screen of the DS having touch sensitivity, movement of your character is done not with a directional pad, but with a stylus. You instead point to where you want to go. To indicate your direction, Seela's glowing form makes for an ideal marker. And with her eager personality apparent from her first sentences, it makes perfect sense that she would be even more excited than Link to charge headlong into battle. As with most Zelda games, Phantom Hourglass does its best to showcase every technological feature its system contains. Both directional control and combat is done via the stylus, with the buttons relegated to providing quick access to your inventory. This allows for easy switching between items, menus, and your map. The ability to interact with the DS is emphasized in several locations, where the solutions to puzzles are done via drawing or through the built-in microphone. The only real downside is that the point-and-tap nature of both movement and swordplay makes combat with the stylus a little rough and pretty repetitive. But although all of the action takes place on the touchscreen, the top screen still has plenty of use. Your map is almost constantly open and ready for your perusal, eliminating the need for repeated pausing and reorientation. You can then bring your map down to the touchscreen and jot down notes whenever you want, making it easy to keep track of combinations, secrets, or other valuable pieces of information. Almost all of this is shown in your trial dungeon, used to bypass a bridge collapse in the center of the island. Seela's guardian, an elderly man named Oshus, warns you to stay put and avoid all contact with the ghost ship. But Tetra's cries won't leave you, and are in fact repeated every time you turn on the game. So, after a search through town, you head north to meet the only man with both a ship to sail and the nerve to stand with you in battle. Well, sort of. The intrepid sailor Linebeck is certainly a personality, but it doesn't take long to realize that he's much more of a blowhard than anything else. Loud, blustering, a complete coward. In a lot of ways, he's Link's polar opposite. He fancies himself a grand adventurer, a real man of the sea. But his actions are much more that of a lazy opportunist. He's intent on getting his hands on the ghost ship's fabled treasure, but any sign of danger, or even work, and he is all too willing to let Link take sole control of the operation. He's obviously not someone you'd expect to help in a pinch, but unfortunately, he seems to be the only one with a boat. But before you set out to sea, you need to know where you're going. And hidden in the Temple of the Ocean King are the charts to take you to your destination. Like so many temples we've seen in Zelda, it was once a sacred structure. but has since been overrun by dark powers. But those powers have done more than just made it difficult to traverse. The phantoms that walk those halls are nearly impervious to attack, and a single swing can mean the end of your life. Even worse, the very air you breathe is filled with a dark aura that drains your life force, requiring every move to be made swiftly and decisively as you dart from safe zone to safe zone. This temple is the centerpiece of the entire game. In a first for the entire series, events require you to return to this exact dungeon 4 to 5 times. With each visit, you travel the same dungeon layout, then travel deeper to new floors and new puzzles. On your second visit, you're granted the Phantom Hourglass, which prolongs the amount of time you can spend in the temple, but it doesn't grant you immunity, and strikes from the phantoms drain away even more time. But as you make repeated trips, you get better and faster at clearing each floor. The early floors eventually become so easy that getting through them is a bit of a yawn, making those repeated trips to the temple one of the biggest annoyances of the game. On the other hand, the later trips show just how good you are getting at the game, and how your expended inventory is making the journey that much easier. With chart in hand, you are finally able to head out to sea. The touchscreen again serves as your guide, allowing you to literally plot out your course across the ocean. Compared to the constant changing of the winds that you had to do in Wind Waker, the directional control of Phantom Hourglass is much smoother and less irritating, while the touchscreen nature of the cannon makes combat a relative breeze, no matter how large the opponent. The reduced size of the map also reduces the time spent on the sea, but it can still be a bit boring, leaving you open to traps and enemies if you get too lazy. But there are still some sights to keep you engaged. Treasure charts make a return, with the added minigame of pulling up your treasure from the ocean floor. Hidden islands not initially displayed on your chart often have contests of speed and accuracy. And even the quieter islands hold hidden treasures should you take the time to look. The rewards vary, but often you earn alternative ship parts, giving you a rather unique flair to your boat and potentially increasing its health. The somewhat random nature of the parts, however, rarely give you the chance to build the ship you want, or even getting all the parts for a complete set, often leaving you with an incomplete, sometimes nightmare of a configuration. The main dungeons, meanwhile, get back to the tried and true formula of puzzles and combat. What's interesting about these dungeons is how much you are allowed to see at one time. Just like with the rest of the game, the dungeon map is provided immediately, with details regarding doors and other barricades already provided. Even though walls and doors create standard rooms, the design of the dungeons make it seem as if each floor is a single entity. It helps give a feeling that the dungeon is a single structure, and not just a series of rooms. It also allows for more pronounced themes in the puzzles you encounter. As is customary, the bosses make excellent tests for the items found within the temple, and most of them take the battle to both screens, making you pay attention to even more of the action. With the first 2 dungeons completed, you receive not emblems, but fairies, as the spirits of power and wisdom join your party. With the 3rd dungeon, a strange limp fairy joins your group. Returning to your ship, you find Oshus there, who reveals that the comatose fairy is but one piece of a whole, the other piece being Seela herself. With a little magic, Seela regains a great portion of her ability as the spirit of courage, and united with the other spirits, gives you a homing beacon through the demonic fog and straight to the ghost ship. After a thorough exploration and the latest iteration of Energy Volleyball, you finally locate Tetra. But the dark powers of the ghost ship have gotten to her first, draining a large portion of her life force and leaving her little more than a statue. The key to restoring her life lies in eliminating the source of this evil, a dark entity known as Bellum, who has drained the life of countless beings, including the Ocean King, who exists now as a shadow of his former self, the Old Man Oceus. With hopes of restoring peace to the ocean and a significant bribe of riches for Linebeck, you head out to find the sacred metals that, when forged together, will make a sword capable of defeating Bellum. The adventure heads east, finding not just new lands, but new people. Up till this point, you had only dealt with humans. Now, 2 additional races make their appearance. The first are familiar, as the Gorons have endured the floods of this world and have taken their traditional brotherhood culture with them. The second are the Enoki, an eccentric icebound race with some curious ideas about living in society. The characters are fun, just like anywhere else in Zelda. But unlike the first section of the story, your interactions are essentially limited to finding the sacred metals and give you little reason to visit again. Interactions on the sea make a noticeable impact, however. Several wandering ships hold not just items and a trading side quest, but an interesting figure from Linebeck's past. The pirate Jolene just can't seem to let Linebeck go, and will take every opportunity to chase your ship down and duel you for the right to take Linebeck captive. Only after repeated interactions and a final duel do you understand why she's so obsessed with him. And it's actually kind of surprising. Watching Linebeck develop is an unexpected pleasure, coming almost out of nowhere as you wrap up your business with Jolene and make final preparations for a final assault on Bellum's hiding place. Sela's interaction with Linebeck here is truly poignant. The entire time, the two had a fairly heated rivalry, with Sela constantly heckling Linebeck's obvious cowardice, and Linebeck never giving Sela an ounce of respect. Yet here, Linebeck is suddenly feeling contemplative and considerate. It makes you wonder just what has been going on in Linebeck's head, and where it might lead. But all that potential growth is going to have to wait, as you make your final dive into the Temple of the Ocean King. With all of your experience, all of your items, and the Phantom Sword making quick work of the previously invincible Phantoms, you reach the final stairway and Bellum's lair. Bellum is fairly unique as far as final villains go. While most of the Zelda big bads are hulking beasts or imposing men, usually some form or another of Ganon, Bellum is closer to the nightmares of Conolent, a bulk of tentacles and a rather amorphous form protected by an impenetrable shell. Unfortunately, it honestly feels like Bellum's potential is a bit squandered here. Instead of taking advantage of its shape-shifting form, you just hit the tentacles and hit the eye. It's only after you've chased it up the main chamber that a new mechanic and a new power is introduced to you. Sela's ability to stop time is an exercise, fittingly enough, in timing. Leaving your enemy exposed for extended periods is obviously a great ability to have, but the somewhat sporadic way Bellum moves makes him difficult to pin down. If you don't time the technique correctly, the frozen foe will be just out of your reach, making your use of the time sphere completely useless. And at this point, stopping time is the only way to do any damage. So you better learn how to time it right, or you're in for a slow, painful death. With Bellum defeated, the Ocean King is able to bring you out from the depths of the temple. Bellum's power appears to have all but vanished, finally returning Tetra to normal. But you should know by now, one encounter is never enough for a final boss. Bellum's tentacles appear out of nowhere, dragging Tetra into a black void and onto the ghost ship. With Linebeck at the helm, you give chase, pelting Bellum's many eyes with as many cannonballs as you can. The final scene lays on the wreckage of the ghost ship. Tetra, though unconscious, appears unharmed. Then Bellum rears its monstrous form, knocking the Phantom Sword out of your grasp. all hope seems lost, when who should make the brave stand but Lineback, giving just enough leeway to break you and Tetra free, but aggravating Bellum to the point of taking possession of Lineback and creating a final phantom that you must face head-on. With Sela trapped, yet still able to lend support, and implementing both screens to see Lineback in front and Bellum in back, you are finally able to bring the demon to its final squirms and eliminate it once and for all. The aftermath is bittersweet. The joy of victory and the true reunion of Link and Tetra is dampened a bit by the loss of Lineback's ship. Yet the power of the Ocean King remains, and his true form is revealed, and the wish he promised Lineback is fulfilled. With all that is right restored, it's finally time to say goodbye, as spirits cannot long interact with the living. And so, like Navi, Tattle, and other companions past, the departure leaves us with both the pain of loss and the fond memories of what was learned along the way. And it isn't just one companion, for despite his cowardice, Lineback stayed with you as well. And in the most dire of moments, he was able to step up, and in spite of his terror, stand against a foe well beyond his ability to take on. We often forget that courage takes many forms. We spend so much time taking on the role of the fearless hero, we forget that the limits of our courage are truly tested only when our fears bring us to our knees. And yet, despite that fear, we step forward, willing to face our doubts, our challenges, and our own weaknesses in order to achieve our goals and make our dreams come true. Phantom Hourglass is not the best Zelda game. It's simple, fairly short, and a bit repetitive. Most people could probably be fine ignoring this title and moving on to more exciting, more dramatic adventures in Hyrule and elsewhere. But adventure doesn't necessarily have to involve the gravest of circumstances, the greatest of foes, or the hardest of challenges. Sometimes all it takes is a purpose, a friend, and the determination to see things through, even just for the sake of a smile. Even in those simple times, good deeds can still be done, and lessons can still be learned. As the fog lifts and Tetra and Link return to their ship, the only thing left with them are their memories. For the ghost ship has vanished, and nothing but an empty hourglass left in Link's possession. But with the telltale sounds of Lineback's horn, it is certain that those adventures were very real, and those deeds were well worth the time and effort. Eventually, Link, Zelda, and even Lineback will find their homes and their fortunes. But for now, the open sea awaits, now at peace thanks to the courage shown and the sands of life housed in the Phantom Hourglass. Thanks everyone for returning to the seas with me in Phantom Hourglass. It's been an insane 2020, with so many events, disasters, and struggles, as we all try to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe, both physically and mentally. I thank you for your patience as I navigate my rough seas, and wish you all luck and support as you travel your own. As always, I would love to hear your perspectives on this adventure, so let me know what items, puzzles, and enemies you remember most from this game. If you want to see my adventures in Phantom Hourglass, you can find the link down below, along with all the other tributes I've made for the Zelda series. Join me next time, as we we leave the seas behind and take to the rails as our adventure takes a somewhat ghostly turn in The Legend of Zelda: Spirit Tracks. See you all soon.